For the very first time in this war, Russian kamikaze drones have crossed into NATO territory. Not Ukraine, not some disputed borderland, but Poland itself. A red line, violated in the dead of night. In total, hundreds of drones rained down on Ukrainian cities. Yet more than 20 pushed deeper, slipping into Polish airspace. And for the first time, NATO jets scrambled, intercepting and destroying Russian targets in direct combat. This isn't just another incident in a long war. This is a dangerous message from Moscow, a test of NATO's determination, a provocation designed to see how far Vladimir Putin can push before the West finally pushes back. What does it mean when Russian drones strike inside a NATO member state? Is it an accident? Or a deliberate step toward escalation? And more importantly, how will the alliance respond to this challenge? The night of September 10th began like so many others in this war, with another massive Russian strike against Ukraine. More than 420 drones were launched in waves, alongside dozens of missiles, hammering cities and infrastructure. But this time, the attack did not stop at Ukraine's borders. At least 20 of those drones crossed into Polish airspace. 20 machines of war, each carrying explosives, moving into the skies of a NATO member. According to Warsaw, the Polish Air Force reacted immediately. F-16s roared into the night sky, joined by Dutch F-35s already stationed on NATO's eastern flank. Together, they intercepted the incoming threat. Several drones were destroyed, marking the very first time that NATO fighter jets engaged and brought down Russian targets in direct combat. This was no small skirmish. It was a historic moment. For the first time, NATO's defenses were forced into action, not in training, not in exercises, but in real war conditions against Russian weapons. The Polish government wasted no time in defining the event. Officials declared it an act of aggression, a deliberate violation of sovereignty. For Warsaw, this was not about a handful of drones. It was about a clear message. Poland's skies had been invaded by a hostile power, and the country had no choice but to defend itself. The image of NATO fighters intercepting drones over Poland was unprecedented. Never before had the alliance been forced to shoot down Russian targets in active combat. That fact alone sent shockwaves across Europe. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The political response came swiftly. In Warsaw, Prime Minister Donald Tusk addressed the nation with a grave warning. He declared the drone incursion a large-scale provocation. Not a random mishap, but a deliberate challenge. His words were sharp. Poland must prepare for all scenarios, even the possibility of escalation. From Kiev, President Volodymyr Zelensky echoed that assessment. He reminded the world that, yes, in the past, a stray Russian drone or missile had occasionally slipped into NATO airspace, but those were isolated incidents, rare and accidental. What happened on this night was something very different. More than 20 drones crossing into Poland in a single wave. That, Zelensky said, cannot be dismissed as chance. Together, their statements painted a chilling picture. This was no accident of war. It was a calculated act, a message from Moscow, one that demanded a united response. And how did Moscow respond? At first, it didn't. The Kremlin remained silent, offering no clarification, no acknowledgement, no apology. That silence, in itself, was telling. Only later did Belarus, Russia's closest ally, attempt to explain away the incident. Officials in Minsk suggested the drones may have lost their course due to electronic warfare interference. After all, it's true that in isolated cases during this war, a single drone has drifted off target. But no one was convinced. One drone? Perhaps. Two? Maybe. But more than 20 drones crossing into NATO territory on the same night? That stretches credibility beyond breaking. The Belarusian explanation looked less like a serious claim and more like an attempt to buy Moscow time, to deflect attention from what seemed far more likely, that this was not an accident at all, but a deliberate test of NATO's patience. Inside Poland, the consequences were immediate and visible. Authorities ordered the temporary closure of sections of national airspace. The most dramatic step came in Warsaw itself, where the country's main international airport was shut down without warning. Flights were grounded, passengers stranded, and the ripple effects spread quickly across Europe. Travelers in Paris, London, and even further abroad felt the impact of drones launched hundreds of miles away. For the Polish people, this was more than an inconvenience. It was a stark reminder that their nation, long seen as a frontline state, was no longer just near the war. It was inside the war's reach. The sight of grounded planes and empty skies turned an abstract fear into a lived reality. Warsaw's answer was not only military, it was diplomatic. Within hours of the incursion, Poland invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty. This clause is the alliance's emergency mechanism, allowing any member to call for consultations when its security feels threatened. Article 4 does not mean automatic military retaliation. It does not trigger the famous collective defense clause, Article 5. But it does force the alliance to meet, to discuss, and to plan a collective response. And that step, in itself, sends a powerful message. NATO considers this incident serious enough to treat it as a threat to all. The last time Poland used Article 4 was on February 24, 2022, the very day Russian tanks rolled across Ukraine's borders. That night, history repeated itself. Once again, Poland raised the alarm, demanding that the alliance act not tomorrow, not someday, but now. What exactly is Vladimir Putin trying to achieve with actions like this? To many analysts, the answer is clear. He is testing the limits of the West. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia has repeatedly pushed the boundaries. Cyber attacks, disinformation, covert operations, and finally, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Each move was designed to probe how much the West would tolerate before striking back. The drone incursion into Poland fits perfectly into this pattern. By sending more than 20 drones into NATO airspace, Moscow forces the alliance into a dilemma. If NATO responds firmly, Russia can claim that the West is escalating the war. If NATO responds weakly, Putin sees confirmation that he can keep pushing without consequence. This is the essence of Russia's strategy: to blur the line between accident and aggression, to operate in the gray zone where hesitation and division weaken the enemy. The danger of this drone attack goes far beyond Poland's borders. What happened in one night is a reminder that Europe itself is exposed. If Russian drones can cross into NATO territory once, they can do it again. And next time, they might not be intercepted in time. A drone striking a Polish town, or worse, killing civilians, would transform a tense standoff into a full-blown crisis. That is why leaders across Europe view this incident not as a Polish problem, but as a European problem. Because every violation of NATO airspace chips away at the security guarantees that have kept peace on the continent since the end of the Cold War. Repeated incursions could have catastrophic consequences. They could force NATO into direct confrontation with Russia, dragging the continent into a conflict not seen in generations. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any updates from the world of military news.